Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are so glad to have you here today for COACT's annual Children's Mental Health Awareness Month event. A reminder, we are recording this panel discussion, and before we go, we'll tell you where you can watch it and how to share it with others who may benefit from this. So let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Crystal Soto, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am the Systems of Care Project Director for COACT Colorado under Behavioral Health Administration or BHA. If you're new to COACT, let me tell you a little bit about the program. So we're focused on supporting youth and families through high fidelity wraparound services across the state. This work is made possible through federal funding from SAMHSA, and we invite you to learn more after today's event at coact/colorado.org. Now, a little bit about this year's focus before we get started. So last year, we highlighted the mental health needs of young people across Colorado through workforce perspectives. Following that, we asked our community what they wanted to explore next. One theme that really stood out was the relational trauma. So many of you expressed a desire to hear directly from young people and families about how relational trauma has affected their lives and how it impacts development and well-being, and most importantly, what healing can look like. Others were eager to understand how professionals are supporting those very same things. We're honored to bring that conversation to you all today. And with that, I'd like to welcome our moderator, Tanya Hotman with Claremont Elliott. Thanks, Tanya.
All right. Thanks a lot, Crystal. We are going to just tell you that because this is 11:30 a.m. on a Thursday, we know you may be doing this over your lunch hour. We appreciate you being here. You might be multitasking. It's totally fine if you do not have your camera up, but we're also a pretty collaborative bunch, and we do want to hear from you eventually. Some of you were able to give us questions and submit those before today, which is wonderful. We'll be addressing those. And then we do have the chat. So please feel free, if you have questions, you can drop them in the chat, or you can hold them and then just use that during our Q&A session towards the end. So if for some reason we don't get to your question, let's say you put it in the chat and we had to go, please know that we're going to follow up with you and answer that to the best of our ability. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at our voices and perspectives for this year's Children's Mental Health Awareness Month event. And so each of our panelists, as you can see here just from their names and their titles and where they're representing, they bring a depth of knowledge and understanding of caregiver relationships, attachment disruption in the context of relational trauma. They do represent folks who have lived experience and are advocates and professionals and clinicians. They live or work in communities all across the state of Colorado, which is wonderful. And that includes those rural, frontier, mountain communities, and also our urban communities like Pueblo, Colorado, and Denver Metro. We appreciate each of them being here today. So I'm going to have the gallery come back up if that's the way that you have your monitor set. And I'm going to have each of our panelists just kind of give a wave as I introduce them. And that way you'll know who you're hearing from today. So Josephine de Herrera, we're going to introduce her first. Josephine is an adoptive mother and also previously a foster parent, and she's in Pueblo County. Jordan Gruel, yep, she's on now. Jordan, so let me just say, Jordan gets extra points today because she has a newborn, but she's doing her best to be here with us today. She's a mental health advocate, and she aged out of the foster system in the state of Colorado. Haley Sin, Raise the Future. She is the Director of Family Support Services and a trust-based relational intervention practitioner. Raise the Future, for those who are unfamiliar, is a nonprofit that works on behalf of children in foster care and also offers adoptive family support services. Meredith Villiers. Go ahead and give a wave. Hi, Meredith. She is a licensed clinical social worker, and she's also the independent program manager for the Colorado Behavioral Health Administration. So it's great to have that state perspective as well. A quick note, you won't see Scott Lindemeyer here today. He's a family support practitioner with Raise the Future in their mountain region of Colorado. Scott was not feeling well today, so he said, please, send my best to everybody, and Haley will be able to answer a lot of questions and perspective that he would typically. So we'll be missing Scott today. All right, so we're going to go ahead and kick our discussion off with a question that was submitted to us. And this really does help us identify relational trauma a bit more, put it in context of how we're seeing it in the state of Colorado. For our panel, what are the signs or dynamics that you've seen when a youth or family has experienced relational trauma? And Haley, if you're able to, I'm going to go ahead and kick that to you first.
First, I think one of the biggest things that I have seen is what I would call the behavioral or emotional roller coaster. Relational trauma causes ruptures in the attachment cycle, which causes disruptions in trust, self-worth, self-regulation, and self-efficacy, which is the ability to use one's voice. All of this can ultimately result in mental health disorders. When these disruptions happen, humans find a different way to meet those needs. And often after trauma, the way that they meet their needs is not in a typical way. So a child might spit to say, don't touch me. A teen may throw things or become aggressive to say, I messed up. And an adult may disengage to say, I'm afraid to be alone. Even with these behaviors, humans desperately want to connect, since we are hardwired to do so, but they don't know how to, or at least how to do it without getting hurt. At the same time, these behaviors are not every second of every day, although it can feel like that to the people who are living in the middle of it. The child who spat came home with a beautiful art piece for their caregivers, but when their caregivers came in for a hug, reaction. The teenager who threw something was helping their caregiver cook dinner. When they spilled flour all over the floor, reaction. The adult realized that their sobriety means that they lose all of their supports, reaction. This is that emotional roller coaster where a good thing can be immediately followed by a big or sometimes not so big behavior.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I know we had to go through those quickly, but that resonates. Josephine and Jordan, I'd like you to bring you in here, especially. What would you add to this?
Okay, I would like to add with my experience with one of my little boys. I did experience the hitting, the kicking, the tantrums, and it was more so with myself than my husband. He reacted to women differently than he did men. So I got most of those reactions, the spitting, the biting, the hitting. So those were my experiences with the trauma that he had faced, and learning to trust women was very difficult for him. So yeah, those are definitely some of the behaviors that I experienced from him. And so with my case, with the boys that I took in, being that the other ones were very young, they were newborns when I got them. He was the only one that can really display those tantrums and those reactions from everything that he experienced. So yeah, that was definitely my experience as well.
With me, I feel like I went through a lot of foster families because I would start to feel that pull from them, like things are going well, and it would result in my brain just saying like, oh no, this is too good to be true. They're going to get rid of me. And so instead of like embracing the good, my brain would turn it into like, I have to get rid of them first before they get rid of me. And this would result in me just constantly going through foster families and making relationships so hard. And not even just with foster families, but friendships and partners. And just in general, I was pushing everyone away because I was so scared of like, they're going to get rid of me. So I had to be the one that got rid of them first. And it just really impacted like everything in my life until I started working through that and kind of recognizing it and doing what I needed to do to get past it.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about how folks responded to you, Jordan, here in just a minute. But I do think this is a great segue into our next question. And that is, how does attachment, and that really can be insecure or secure attachments, play a central role in relational trauma? And so I'd like Meredith to take this question first.
Thank you. So really and truly, our experiences of trauma and relational dynamics are really the blueprints of our brain's development and how we develop our cognition, our regulatory abilities, and really even our physical tendencies. Our brains are designed to anticipate what is going to be happening in that immediate future, so that way we can then plan and carry out those adaptive actions. And so when somebody experiences, consistent disapproval from their primary caregiver, their brain is more likely than to anticipate that they will be experiencing disapproval and then acting accordingly based on that. And so this is something that we see frequently. And then when you add really that trauma piece into it, it also then adds into those that experience that feels like threatening and really kicks in those primitive survival defenses, that fight or flight response, that fight or freeze response, as well as that dysregulation. So having a harder time really being able to control our emotions, and at times even that physical dysregulation. When those aren't addressed early on, then we really see those become more ingrained in a person's ability to respond. And that becomes pervasive in the fact that it can be really difficult then to trust and comes across as, as I think Jordan had mentioned, feeling like your brain kicks in saying, this is too good to be true. And so then as a protective mechanism, I'm going to push you away so that way I can have that control. I think though it's really important to say that even though this can result from trauma, there is ways to really repair those attachments. And so I think a lot of times we see where that attachment theory kind of can get used in a way that actually ends up causing more harm, because there's the belief that, oh, that attachment was disrupted, and now we need to find that secure attachment instead of looking at how can we repair those attachments to support that family and that youth.
Thank you. Josephine, would this be somewhere that you might like to talk as well? Because I know before the event, we talked about how unique each of your sons are. And I imagine finding out about attachment was a longer process because of that.
It definitely was a longer process and I could speak for my oldest son because he's the one that came later. He was older and had more time with his birth family than the other three. So that attachment took a lot longer. That trusting, I feel like it took a lot longer to establish trust with him and to get him to a place to where he felt like he was safe. It was more difficult because, I felt like he knew for the longest time, like, well, you're not my mother. So for him to gain some sort of trust or attachment with me, specifically me, for some reason, it wasn't toward my husband, it was toward me. And I felt like, he struggled a lot, and just trying to let him know, like, I love him, I'm going to care for you, I'm going to keep you safe. That was something still to this day I feel like I still have to do. And he's 12 now, and you would think like he would kind of grow out of it, but it's something that is still something I still have to reassure him with. So yeah, that's my experience. But yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. As we have said, it's a lifelong pursuit to
Oh, yes.
understand and
Hmm.
and nurture children. Could we go ahead and go to the next series of questions? And that is because we're already kind of talking about how we're each responding or how you all are each responding in your own ways. But I would like to bring Meredith back in here because we talk about responding to this, whether that is a diagnosis or it is just the understanding of that there was relational trauma. Meredith, do you want to speak to that a bit?
Yes, with the state, we are really trying to reform our entire behavioral health system. We do currently have programs that we are working on really on that prevention side. So things such as Child First, which is really helping to improve that parent-child relationship for children 0 to 5. As well as Special Connections, which provides residential substance use disorder treatment for pregnant or postpartum individuals that allows them to keep their families together. So really looking at how can we support before that trauma even occurs. But then knowing that we do have these traumas and really looking at how do we respond to it appropriately as a state and within our systems. So we are working in partnership with our partners over at Healthcare Policy and Finance, who oversee our state Medicaid, as well as the Department of Human Services, who oversees our child welfare and Division of Youth Services. And really working with them to build out a system of care for children and youth and families who have higher needs. The goal with that is how can we increase these intensive in-home and community-based services to provide to these families, so that way we are really addressing the concerns in the home and with the entire family unit, as well as increasing access to those services and bringing in kind of all of the different systems and providers who work with the family to ensure that we're providing wraparound support and really treating the entire family and entire child or youth and moving away from kind of having that in silos and isolation of here, we are going to look at our behavioral health services at our therapist's office. We are going to do school and, we're going to focus on the education, but really seeing how we can all come together to really meet the needs as for that family unit.
Crystal, could I bring you in to answer the second part of this question? Because we do know that youth and families in outstate areas, these mountain communities, Western Slope, they are experiencing difficulties with mental health disproportionately more than others. And sometimes that is just lack of affordable housing or other social determinants of health. So from your perspective, especially with high fidelity wraparound, how are we addressing those at a state level or even a community level in your mind?
Sure. Thanks, Tanya. It's really about getting in contact with resources that are there and know their communities, and then tapping in with those people that have already built that rapport with their communities and their people, and understanding what their cultural values are. What do they look forward to? Because everyone's cultural differences are completely different, right? Between Tanya, Meredith, and Josephine's, we probably have all a different lens. So it's really essential to understand their cultural preferences, to build that rapport, to understand where they're coming from, and just look at it in a whole different lens and try a different route. And, be open minded, most importantly, because, you have to understand that they have a unique situation. Versus us urban folks, or I wouldn't say Pueblo, so urban, we're also a little sparse in the resource area, but not as sparse as Crawley County or Alamosa. Like those are much more rural, small communities. And it's really, really essential to build that rapport, number one, though, because these communities are, vulnerable, and they've been, too exposed to a lot of trauma, and, having that relationship is essential. So that's where we really key in on, and just finding some people in regards to the workforce that are really specific and tailored to cultural and linguistics that could really guide us and give us some more information on how we could be more proactive to these rural regions.
Yeah. Jordan, can I rely on you because we had talked about your experience on the Western Slope? How do you view that, whether it was finding support in a more rural or Western Slope area or just the support you got?
Yeah, so my experience was that in rural areas, it's really hard to find resources because it's scarce. And the resources that you do find, with it being such a small community, they tend to have very similar opinions. And so, like, my hometown was not informed on mental health, and they weren't for the LGBTQ community, and they like band together on their values. And so, when you do find resources that you need, it's like the resource that you have isn't like broad, it's tailored to their opinions, and it makes it really hard to find even like a therapist that has the proper training to do things like EMDR. I had an experience with that in a small rural town where she said that she knew how to do it and really she didn't. And then you have those experiences where you do find someone and they don't share the same beliefs and they project those upon you. And it further creates more trauma because these are supposed to be the people that you're trusting and opening up to and reaching out for help. But in turn, you're getting like their opinions projected onto you or not the right experience, kind of stuff like that.
Okay, I am going to use that to head into our very last question of this section because I think that's important. And that relational trauma doesn't just impact one person, it impacts the entire family unit. So, the question that was submitted to us before today was, what are the most effective ways to engage with families as a unit? That is a core principle, certainly, of the BHA and of COACT in having this family centered approach. So Meredith, would you mind coming back in here on that? And then Haley, I would also like to know how Raise the Future addresses this.
Yeah, so I think one of the most effective ways is really how do we support, once again, that whole family unit in a way that, you know, and I think we say this all the time, but culturally responsive. Really looking at what those families' needs are, what their background is, and what their lens is, as well as actually treating the family as the expert in their own situation. I think sometimes we also tend to say that, but don't really look at that, especially from the professional side. But hearing what families, when they tell us what they need, listening to them and then helping provide them. I also think when we do have youth who have kind of higher needs that require that residential level of care, that we are also making sure that we are bringing the family in to that treatment modality. So that way, when it is time to transition back home, and then when they transition back home, that work has already begun, that family work. I think we frequently look at treating kind of things in isolation, as I previously said. And so it's, how do we know, we realize, right, when we're talking about children and youth, they are part of their family unit, and making sure that we are addressing that entire family unit. Treating that child or youth in isolation does not ever result in the outcomes that we are looking to achieve, because it typically takes kind of that entire family, whether it's coaching, whether it is doing their own therapeutic work, whether it's peer support, but providing those full supports to the family and treating that as that entire unit.
Yeah, I would agree. We definitely want to approach the family in a holistic way. So that means even when we have practitioners going in the home to do intensive in-home coaching, we're not just looking at the family either. We're looking at everybody that touches the life of that child. That might be teachers, that might be therapists, that could be OTs or PTs. We are looking at all aspects that approach that child's life to make sure that they are receiving all the services that they need and that they're not getting two different sides of the coin. We don't want a therapist to be telling them to do one thing and our practitioner to be telling them to do another thing. We want to make sure everybody's on the same page because these families have so many providers coming in and out of their home that it can become overwhelming and exhausting. And then we get families that disengage because they're like, you know what, I can't do any of it because all of it is too much. So we want to make sure that we're meeting the families where they're at and seeing them for where they are. Especially recently, we've seen more and more families that are nervous to bring practitioners into their home because of everything that's going on in the world. And so we're like, okay, that's fine. Let's meet at the park. Let's meet at McDonald's. It doesn't have to be in your home. We're going to do whatever makes you feel the most comfortable so that we can be successful.
Thank you so much for that. All right, let's move into our final area of conversation around relational trauma, and that is about the moving on and becoming healthier and happier. And we want to recognize that every child is more than an ACEs score or a potentially stigmatizing label. They are their strengths and their capacity to grow. So what I would like to really ask Jordan first, and then maybe Josephine, how do you see that? What does this mean to you, the healing and stability after something like this has occurred?
So for me, it just means that with my son, I get to have a healthy relationship, and I've learned what to do and what not to do with him based off of my experiences. And the best thing that I tell people is my family never taught me how to be a parent, but they sure taught me how not to be a parent. And now I have, it's taken a lot of work, but I have an amazing support system, and I've had a bunch of people come around me and support us. And this has just taught me that I can be a good parent and have these good relationships, and I can maintain these relationships in my life. I mean, I've known some of these people for 6+ years, and that's a big thing because I've never ever been able to do that. And so the fact that I can now, it just it means the world to me that I have had these people step up and come in, and I am the person I am today, because that means that I'm healthy and thriving, and I have a business and a baby, and it's just been the most amazing thing. And looking back from where I was even 2 years ago, 5 years ago, it's just the amount of improvement and learning that my past does not define me, and I can be the person I am today, and I don't have to let those people in my past or those experiences hold me back from being who I want to be and meeting my goals. So
For me, this process has two parts. There is the part that, for me as a mom, being the emotional stability for my boys and reassuring them that they're safe and that everything is open. Their adoption is open. Anything, nothing has been a secret. And continuing to get the care for the boys, whether it's PT, OT, they all have some sort of therapy or something from their birth families. Right? There's a two, for me, it's two parts. Okay, making sure they're safe, caring for these kids, making sure all their needs are met. And then the second part is going to be when they're old enough for me to explain why they were adopted. So it's that preparation of okay, I've taken care of you. I've made sure you have everything you need. So when these questions do come of, well, why was I adopted? I'm able to answer those questions for them to where they know, I loved you, I cared for you, and there was nothing wrong with you, even though sometimes I feel like they don't understand why they have to go through all the therapies that they're going through. It's just for me, it's always just reassuring them that I love them and they're wanted and they're cared for, And for my oldest son, just establishing that trust that I'm always going to be there for him through all of the trials that he faces, because there's still so much to his story that he doesn't quite understand just yet. But just being that cornerstone of stability for these boys is ultimately my goal in raising them.
Thank you so much for that. Let's move to the last part of the question, and I'd like the entire panel to participate in this. And that is because not only because Children's Mental Health Awareness Month is about understanding all of different facets of mental health and the way that we are being responsive to it and just understanding each other better and connecting with each other and improving our relationships. It also looks to the reality that so many of us are facing, and that things are more complex than they used to be. So this last question, again, something that folks wanted to hear about when they showed up today. So hopefully the person who asked this question is nearby. Despite living in an increasingly unpredictable world, what do you see as signs of hope and resilience in our communities? And I'm going to have Crystal kick this question off first, or the answer.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you, Tanya. So despite living in, an increasingly unpredictable world we live in today, I really do see hope and resilience and the way that our communities come together and support one another. I've learned personally that advocacy, and the use of available resources are essential, even when those resources are really difficult to navigate. Through these challenges, we're able to develop strength and we're able to develop perseverance. So, I ensure, and I know that many of you are, have been through this route or experienced this with, your clientele or your workforce, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. With that support, with that trust, and those connections, those meaningful connections, people can find help and build resilience and really ultimately create meaningful lives. We're not defined by our past or by our actions or by others or what's going on around us, like in the world. Instead, we're shaped by our ability to rise, to push forward, and to recognize our inherent worth. Resilience is the foundation that allows us to rebuild and thrive. If anyone else wants to touch on that.
I see hope in the manner of it's being talked about a lot more. And we're starting to break that stigma around mental health issues and relational issues and stuff like that. And one way I see this is on social media, specifically like TikTok. People are sharing a lot of their stories and just kind of starting to break this stigma. And that's the first step in developing a community that's going to be like helping. Is first we have to break that stigma and get everyone on board. And so this just gives me hope, sorry, because it's like you don't have to be afraid anymore. You are your experiences, because that's not, and you don't have to hide. Being able to talk, create more people wanting to learn help. And I've also seen this communities popping up and support groups and just all sorts of type of things. Like everyone is just starting to get on board with it and open up um, things that can help and stuff like that. So it's been really cool to see that transition through social media and everything.
Yeah, I've seen that transition too, especially since the pandemic. I've seen this transition of not only are we talking about it more, but people are not just wanting to be trauma informed, they want the tools to help heal that trauma. They're like, please, like, what can we do? What can we do better? Because I've also seen this shift of what we're doing currently isn't working. I've seen more schools jump on board and be like, okay, yeah, let's add fidgets. Let's talk about it. Let's integrate trust-based relational intervention into IEPs. Like, we want these kids to be successful because we're realizing that what we're currently doing is not set up for a kid's success. And we're seeing this turnaround over and over and over again. I've seen a lot of agencies, like I'm working very closely with Adams County right now because they're like, we've got to do something different because our kids are just entering the system and then entering it again and then moving homes over and over and over again. So what we're doing currently is not working, and please help us. So it's not only like this shift of, hey, we need to be more aware of mental health issues and what's going on in the world, but also let's do something about it as a community.
Yeah, I think really just to echo what both Haley and Jordan and Crystal said is, I think one thing that I see that gives me a lot of hope is that there has just been more conversations about it. And there seems to be more acceptance and really kind of some political will to say that we know that we have problems in our communities. We have gaps, and people who need help aren't getting the help they need when they need it, which then just continues to exacerbate kind of those concerns, those symptoms until we get to those crisis points. And so I am really seeing, I have been at the state now for 3 years. Before that, I was in, and really just even in my short time at the state, seeing kind of different agencies coming together to say, what can we kind of do more holistically? How can we start kind of combining our efforts to really look at how do we streamline access, how do we support building out kind of the workforce, and begin to address these needs at that statewide level in a way that historically we have not done before. And also seeing communities as it's becoming more talked about and accepted, right? That like this is the further that we continue to kind of destigmatize these needs, the more we also see communities and communities that we wouldn't necessarily think of being at the forefront of what can we do to really support our community members, and knowing that a lot of times these have to come kind of at that grassroots on the ground level. We only have so much power at that state, and so looking at I know Eagle County, I think 5 years ago started their own community mental health center because their needs were not being met by the providers that they had in the community. And so really saying what can we do and coming together, and that I think for me, we have a long road ahead of us still, but it feels like we are moving in the right direction.
Josephine, before I have you answer, Meredith, your audio is a little hard to hear, so I'm not sure if you can bump that up if you answer a question when we get to the question answers. All right.
Oh, no, sorry, I am on a loaner computer. So
the struggle's real. We do virtual. Josephine.
For me, the hope that I have is seeing how my boys have, they're thriving with the community that I built around them. I had to really advocate for my boys, and unfortunately had to look for the resources myself that the boys needed. So I do communicate often with their school, with their therapies that I have in-home therapy for the boys. So that constant communication in the community that I built around my boys I've seen them grow and thrive. They have broken so many barriers where people and doctors have said that these boys, would have difficulty, and they're doing so well. So the hope that I have starts here at home, because that acceptance that I feel like I have given the boys, and then my other daughters as well, we accept these boys. We have removed that stigma of adoption and the trauma that they experience out of the home. That way there's no shame saying, yeah, I'm adopted, or we're building them so when they do get out into the world, like they're not ashamed of that circumstance of which they were born into. So that community that I built here in the home, I hope that they take that out to when they enter in the world, and can be a beacon of hope for other kids that are adopted or have gone through foster care. That the way that they came in is not how they have to continue their lives. So
we see you, and we appreciate everything you've done.
Yeah.
We would like to open it now to questions, and I know we've skipped over some of the topics that are kind of heavy. We just got to touch on, so it's very likely that you may have had a question coming in today that didn't get answered, or one has come up for you since then. Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to do it that way. We'll do our best to spot you in our large gallery, or if you'd like to put it in the chat, we can read it for you. whatever works for you, because I know we have a lot of folks on here who've probably been at least curious about what each individual on our panel has gone through. So, and we can always give it a minute if you are noodling something. For our panel, while we wait to see if and just make sure nobody else sees a raised hand, right? We're all good there, I think. For our panel, was there anything else that someone else said? We only had maybe 1 or 2 opportunities to talk as a group before today. Was there anything else that really touched you today that another one of the panelists said? Well, I might ask a question. Jordan, can I ask you, can you tell us a little bit about, was there a point in your journey, because I'm not exactly sure when you were first placed in foster, or if you had opportunities to say, whether or not you wanted to be part of a family or not. What was that like from your perspective? Was there someone helping you make those decisions, or did you feel like you were on your own?
So I did want to be part of a family. And I actually had 2 failed adoptions. One of them was like the ideal home. I was the only child that was like full-time living in a home. They had boys, but they had never had a girl. And that adoption fell through. And then I went straight into another family that had 10 kids, and I made 11. And that adoption also fell through. So that was after that second one. That was kind of the moment I went into Shiloh House for long term. And in that moment, I remember feeling like I was completely alone, like it was me against the world. And nobody was staying with me. There was no consistency. Like my caseworker had just left. And so I had like a whole new team. And I think that was the moment where my mindset went from like, I'm completely alone to I don't have to be. And I'm just going to work on creating my own family. And when I first got to Shiloh House, I was like, I don't need help. I don't want to be here. Like, I don't need to be here. Look at all these other crazy people who do, but like, I'm different. I don't need to be here. And so it kind of took like that mind switch of like, I do need help if I want to accomplish the goals that I want. And my goal is to have a family and to be my own thing. And so from there, that was pretty much the point where I kind of just started making my own group of people separate from like the people who I thought were going to be my family, so to say. And I had to start building friendships, and people stepped in as like maternal roles for me, and now like grandmother roles for my son, and therapists that have helped. And um, so yeah, I did think I was going to be alone, but then I had that kind of switch of like, well, I can create my own family and they don't determine if I'm alone or not. I can make my family and I don't have to stay alone, and I don't have to stay in this cycle of going from family to family and so on. And so it was hard, but I feel a lot better now that I've achieved it and I can see it all falling into place. So
I have a question. Sorry, I was trying to raise my hand and I think I'm having some technical problems here.
Go
But
ahead, Britt. Yeah.
I'm Britt Moore. I'm the director of comms here at Raise the Future. And Jordan, your story is just so inspiring and you are such a pillar and I just admire you. I have a question for you. What changes would you like to see in the foster care system that could better support children and youth?
yeah, I feel like the biggest thing is there just needs to be a lot more youth advocacy and voice. It seems like we're the state is definitely getting better about listening to the youth, but not really implementing the changes. And I definitely see it happening more where they're having like questionnaires for the youth to fill out or starting to get youth voice. But I definitely think that needs to be a more prominent thing. We need to be getting these young kids involved in their own treatment. Like for me, I did not let my team speak for me in court. Like, I fought them to the death of that. And I was like, I am going to court myself and I will present myself in front of the judge. I do not want you guys speaking for me. And so every month I would go to the judge myself. And my team knew that they couldn't stop me for speaking for myself. And so they instead just embraced that and taught me how to do it more. And I feel like there needs to be a lot more of that, because right now it's just caseworkers and GALs going to court for the kid and speaking for them rather than bringing them along in that process and showing them how to advocate for themselves and do it in a healthy and efficient manner. And so I definitely think we need to get way more kids involved and teach them this is how you speak for yourself, not how somebody else speaks for you.
I also can't figure out how to raise my hand. So I was going to say something similar, Britt, and I appreciate that question. And I just want to say to Jordan, thank you for coming here and speaking what you spoke today, because I don't know why I'm emotional, because I've never met you, but I've worked in this system a long time, and I have always wanted to know how kids, how they're doing when I'm done working with them, right? And so I just appreciate you being so vulnerable and brave and and professional in the way you've spoken today. So thank you for that. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
And congratulations on your baby. And it sounds like you're going to be a great mom despite all the stuff. So good for you.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Tanya. Do we have a moment?
Yes, I would love it. I was going to ask if you would talk about especially the voice of families in particular, but I'll let you say what you're going to say first.
Thanks, Tanya. I really appreciate that Jordan brought up that specific topic about, how important and essential it is to have that peer voice. That is something that COACT High Fidelity Wraparound really keys in on, is the family support partner, the peer support partner that's involved in the wraparound team. It is essential to hear from that youth. And when that team comes together, they really come together as a team, including the youth, and they allow the youth, to advocate, to learn the experience, to learn what was going on in the process, so that they all could do this as a team together, as a natural support system. And that is something that I do see that's happening commonly now in a lot of programs above. Unfortunately, if you're like in the community level, you don't quite see it yet, but I could ensure that it is happening on the state level, that everyone is talking about how it is so important to have these youth at the table. We have ongoing committees and boards specifically for youth, and it's teaching them and guiding them about so much more: politics, legislation. They're seeing that this is actually making a huge positive effect on the outcomes, and this is important. And I even have a contractor. It is Colorado Family Hub, and we do specifically have peer supports there, youth lived experience, family lived experiences, voices, advisory boards that are within this contract organization, because it is essential to get these voices out and advocate for one another. And the state wants to hear from everyone. So this is a fantastic point of discussion. So thank you, Jordan, for bringing that up.
Maybe another question I can ask of you, Meredith, or you, Haley, is for many families who don't always have the same circumstances, they haven't been taught how to ask for help and receive help. And just within that, I wouldn't go so far as to say that's a trauma, but certainly children may feel that. So for either of you, are there ways that we can start to look within our, let's say our child's peer group or educators or something, so that we're all trying to become a little bit more supportive of each other should we see something that's like, oh, I just think they're really struggling to ask for help, or there may be something here that we can do or offer.
Yeah, I think that that's key to really making change within the system, because you asked a question earlier about our rural communities, and what we have found is oftentimes these families feel completely isolated and like they're alone in all of this, and they don't want to talk about it, because when they do talk about it, people just say, oh, well, you're not parenting correctly, you're not doing it right. So then we see these caregivers that are oftentimes shutting down when they're not the only ones experiencing this. Like, we're hearing about it on a daily basis, and we need to be willing to talk about it more often and be open about it and not critique parents for the way that they're caregiving, but rather offer support. Like, what can we do to band together and to help one another? Like, I always go into any situation with a family, and we at Raise the Future call it throwing spaghetti at the wall. I'm going to throw ideas out there and see what sticks, because you never know what's going to work for your family. Like, it may be the 30th thing that I've thrown out there, and that might be the one thing that you're like, that's it. That's what's working. That's going to make the change. So there's just got to be more communication and more awareness, and looking at somebody and saying, I see you. Like, I don't know where that got lost in our system, but being able to just say, I see you and I see what you're going through can make a world of difference for families.
I completely agree with what Haley said. I think there's kind of the other thing that we see is that when families do know how to ask for help and are trying to ask for help, we also have a system set up in Colorado where it's really, really difficult to navigate it. I joke, but it's not a joke. I have a master's degree in this. I have spent 10 years in the field. I have been at the state for 3 years, and I have a difficult time finding a therapist for myself and my family members. And so I think that in itself could become such a huge barrier to really supporting our families and our children and youth. When they're seeking services, it's hard to find where to even go. And I think in that sense, we can continue to really educate everyone in our communities how to support, how to kind of help navigate. How do we do a better job so that we do have a no wrong door approach, so that a family who is saying, I need help, which is not easy to do. I know it's not easy to do. My own experience, it's not easy to ask for help. But then when you're asking for help, you actually get a response that is going to assist you. I think we have a lot of times, because it's so difficult to navigate, families do ask for help. When they don't get it and continue to face barriers, they find that more frustrating, and then they give up. And so really, how do we intervene? How do we work with our schools to help support, as that tends to be kind of one of those touch points that all of our families and children and youth are involved in and are seeing our children every single day. And so how do we support them so that way when they are noticing maybe a family does need help, or the family's asking, how can they kind of help guide them? How do we really support a system that prioritizes warm handoffs, that prioritizes saying, yeah, you came to me, you said this is what I need, we're going to get that for you. Or if you don't know what you need, then that's okay. We're going to come together and we're going to support you to figure that out as a team.
Holding on to that. Thank you, everyone on our panel, for that discussion. Crystal, I'll let you just finish up a few key pieces, but we really appreciate you all spending an hour of your day.
Sure, thanks, Tanya. So thank you everyone again for joining us today. Wow, this was a tremendous opportunity for COACT, and I hope you all leave with a greater understanding of how this trauma impacts so many of us. As you can see today, we had so many diverse pillars to this conversation. So, please take a moment to see how we're utilizing care coordination to provide high fidelity wraparound, and you could find that at the COACT website, coactcolorado.org. Remember, we will have a recording of this event on YouTube as well. So you can find our channel on COACT Colorado 47-42 or search COACT Colorado to find our playlist. So again, thank you everyone for being here and joining us today. I appreciate you and have a great afternoon. We look forward to seeing you again.